California has always suffered from a lot of weirdness with cults and rumors of underage sex trafficking. In fact, 500 people were recently busted, or nearly 500 people were recently busted there, and California is topping the list in sex trafficking. But I think most people would be surprised to hear just how many prominent politicians in California are avowed communists. Wilma Chan, for example, who serves on the Alameda Board of Supervisors, Alameda County Board of Supervisors, was once the chairperson for the National Asian Struggles Commission, which is a subsidiary of the League of Revolutionary Struggle. At the time, this was America's largest pro-China communist organization, and today her bio proudly describes her as a Maoist leader in Oakland and Bay Area politics. And then there's By Any Means Necessary, or BAMN. BAMN is an anarchist group that recruits at public high schools and colleges. They've been behind the violent activism in Michigan and Oakland and Berkeley, and the group claims responsibility for the violence at the Berkeley riots. Here's Yvette Falarca, a school teacher and spokesman for BAMN, who spends her weekends physically attacking people she calls fascists.
They have anything done to them, are they?
Nazi, come get the off our street! Get the fuck off our
Are
street!
these people going to do anything?
Get the fuck off our street!
Hey, we don't have freedom of speech?
Need to go, boy!
Hey, say we should go. Come here,
Get the fuck
Nazi.
off our street! Get the fuck off our street! Piece of shit! Fuck you!
Sir, please, I'm just here to protest.
Fuck off our street!
Please,
Stand down! Get out! Get back! Get back! Get back!
She's managed so far to deflect all criticism by declaring that those who criticize her are white nationalists or fascists. She's actually a spokesperson for BAMN, and here she is taking responsibility for the violent riots at Berkeley.
But when you take the barricades and you destroy the building and when you set fires, isn't that counterproductive?
You know, I think that the left has been far too timid for way too long. And it's why we've even gotten in this position where we even have someone like Donald Trump leading a fascist movement as the president of the United States. We need to make sure that we have more mass protests, more militant protests that are mass and militant. And the reality is that these aren't people just putting forward their ideas. There's white supremacists who've already murdered 6 Muslims just 5 days ago in Quebec. There was a woman in Korea, or not from Korea, but who was from Korea in Los Angeles, who was just beaten down by a white supremacist. We have a right to defend ourselves, and not only a right, we have an obligation to do that, not just for each other, but for our communities.
Old hippies never die, they just fade away. Take Bill Ayers, for example. During his time with the Weather Underground in the 70s, he and his group bombed several banks, government buildings, and allegedly set fire to a judge's house. Today, Bill's work continues with Disrupt J20 and the Refuse Fascism organization. Now that's funny. It looks like they've removed his name from their website. Good thing I keep screenshots. Now, here's Floyd Huen, a nice older gentleman. Here's his wife, Jean Quan, the mayor of Oakland from 2011 to 2013. Today, these prominent politicians run the Wellstone Democratic Renewal Club, a Bay Area progressive group that backs local politicians such as Berkeley Mayor Jesse Eregwin. And they are now deeply involved in the movement to have California declared a sanctuary state in violation of federal law. I'd like to delve a bit into their history if you'd care to indulge me, just to take a look at how a revolutionary can find themselves embedded in the political system later in life. For me, this story started with the Twitter account FBI Records Vault. Now, they're well known among conspiracy junkies and the counterculture right for releasing links to declassified documents, especially during the 2016 presidential election. One of the bigger revelations to come out of their tweets was the FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation for accepting large sums of money in exchange for presidential pardons. This was the so-called pay for pardon scandal. On February 3rd, FBI Records Vault tweeted a link to 1,200 pages covering the FBI's investigation of the AAPA, the Asian American Political Alliance, a group from Berkeley, and this covered the years 1969 to 1972. The AAPA had deep connections and shared members with other Berkeley radical groups, such as the Third World Liberation Front, the Black Panthers, the Red Guard, and the Students for a Democratic Society. Now, this last one was the Students for a Democratic Society was actually the incubator for the revolutionary terrorist group, the Weather Underground, that we mentioned earlier. The FBI document specifically named Bruce Ocena as both a member of the Weathermen and a founding member of the AAPA. I have to say, it's pretty fascinating making your way through these documents. I've had many people, both communists who are ashamed at racial identity politics and social justice warriors who are economically ignorant, insist that racial identity politics were never a part of communism, never a part of Marxism, and have nothing to do with one another. These documents paint a very different picture, showing that groups like Third World Liberation Front explicitly sought to manipulate and create a race-based consciousness, and to link that to the or replace the class consciousness described by other Marxists. These groups and the other Maoist groups profiled in the documents believe that revolutionary potential no longer existed in first world nations, so their stated goal was to unite third world people and overthrow their white oppressor. For the Asian American Political Alliance, this meant finding a way to unite Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean communists living in America under one name, Asian Americans. And it also meant cooperating with groups like the Black Panthers in their fight against the White Devil. The Weather Underground Manifesto, for example, saw the black proletariat as the spearhead for their revolution. And I'll take a moment to editorialize here a little bit and say that I find the way that American communists, almost exclusively coming from the middle class and almost exclusively students, the way they've attempted to exploit the black community is really pretty gross to read about. Every tragedy that happens in the black community sees groups like the Revolutionary Communist Party latching on like parasites and trying to manipulate things for their own purposes. The revolutionary manifestos of the late 60s refer over and over again to the need to mobilize the black proletariat and to mine it for its revolutionary potential. But the major people of interest through these particular documents are Floyd Huen and his wife, the recent mayor of Oakland, Jean Quan. In many ways, Huen's story is typical of a Berkeley radical. Ethnically Chinese, his family comes across in interviews as traditional and conservative, and his father was naturalized while serving with the U.S. Navy. His hope for his son was that he become a doctor, and Floyd studied medicine before becoming obsessed with Marx and sociology. He did earn his PhD in sociology and continued in that department, earning full pay for years. The main thrust of Huen's radical activity at Berkeley involved the use of identity politics for the sake of seizing key positions within the university. At numerous conferences, speeches, and gatherings, Huen would lead a minority group among radicals to rush the podium, force the master of ceremonies to cede their position, and then they would force through the entry of more radical groups like Third World Liberation Front. Floyd organized student strikes, had meetings with militant groups like the Panthers, the Red Guard. There's even a group called the Yellow Panthers involved. But throughout it all, he managed to maintain at least the appearance that he himself supported only nonviolent protest. So you see a lot of back and forth with him and these militant groups, but he never actually explicitly condoned their actions. There's one incident that's documented in these reports that stands out in contrast to this, and it was during a time that the FBI informant states that Huen was in close contact with the Weather Underground group. This is when an official finds a flight bag in the trunk of a university car. In this bag, there are Maoist posters, pamphlets, and books, and 7 empty .38 ammunition clips. The university car had been checked out for a weekend. And logged under the ID number for Floyd Huen's Asian Studies Department. In one weekend, it had been driven 1,200 miles, and nobody was able to account for this. Huen was questioned by the police, concerned with the possible illicit use of a university vehicle, concerned with the forgotten ammo clips, and the FBI furthered this investigation later, noting that Huen had recently purchased both a 9mm and a .38 pistol. The issue with the military miles and ammo clips even made it into the local newspaper. The questioning from the FBI was eventually abandoned because Richard Aoki, who was a prominent member of the Black Panthers, Asian member of the Black Panthers, who was claimed to be the man who armed the Black Panthers, was actually the FBI informant who filed hundreds of reports on these other revolutionaries. So you see a lot of tie-in between these informants, sometimes the informants being the ones who push these groups to become more militant, and perhaps they were encouraging some of the more violent stuff that was going on. At this point in the documents, Richard Aoki vouched for his friend, and the FBI abandoned the case. At a certain point, every conspiracy theory starts to connect to every other conspiracy theory. Paul Wellstone, for example, the man who gave his name to the Wellstone Democratic Renewal Club and to the Wellstone PAC, died under suspicious circumstances with his wife, child, and 3 others when his plane suffered a mechanical failure, and this was just 11 days before his re-election, a crucial re-election to maintain Democratic control of the Senate. Just 2 days before the accident, Wellstone told a group of military veterans that he had been threatened by Dick Cheney. And he says Dick Cheney told him, if you vote against the war in Iraq, the Bush administration will do whatever is necessary to get to you. There will be severe ramifications for you and the state of Minnesota. There's a lot of conspiracy theories floating around with Paul Wellstone and exactly what happened. That was a crucial vote that led to the war with Iraq. Now, the Wellstone Action Group today receives much of its funding from George Soros, the billionaire who receives a lot of criticism for funding anti-nationalist groups all over the world. What is clear from all of this is that radical politics is not something that exists only at the street level. It continues behind closed doors and in boardrooms where we can't see what's happening. Large amounts of money pour into groups like Bamin. Remember the anarchist group that we mentioned at the beginning that recruits at high schools and colleges? I suspect that these provocateurs are being brought into California for a purpose. And I suspect that purpose has something to do with the Maoist dialectics of their politicians. Remember, kids, when you control the questions being asked, you control the kinds of answers you get in response.